As dawn cracked over the misty fjords of Scandinavia, the air thrummed with menace. Long ships sliced through icy waters, their dragon-headed prows glinting in the first light, oars pounding like war drums. On shore, villages stirred, smoke curling from thatched roofs, fishermen hauling nets, unaware of the storm about to break. In the markets, traders hawked furs, amber beads, and mead, their voices drowned by the sudden blare of war horns. The Vikings were coming, and they brought more than axes. They brought games, bloody, ritualized spectacles that turned slaughter into sport. In the shadows of rune-carved stones, warriors sharpened blades and checked shields, their faces painted with ash and blood. Captives, dragged from sacked settlements, stumbled in chains. Saxon farmers, Frankish monks, Celtic chieftains, their eyes wide with dread or dulled by defeat. From the forest came the howls of wolves, prodded into cages, their hunger stoked for the show. And over it all, a chant rose guttural and fierce as crowds gathered, Vikings in furs, thralls in rags, all hungry for the Empire's rawest art, death as entertainment. These weren't just raids. They were performances woven into the Norse soul, where blood honored gods like Odin and Thor. Villages became arenas, where cruelty was both worship and warning. Jarls and kings staged these games not just for loot, but for loyalty, turning terror into a saga shouted across the seas. And today, we're diving into that brutal world. These are the most savage, most unholy Viking raid rituals that pushed even their hardened hearts too far. From blood eagle executions to wolf pit massacres, we'll uncover how the Norse turned conquest into a theater of doom. Before we start, smash that subscribe button so you don't miss our next saga into history's shadows. Now stand on the shore. The long ships are landing. The first Viking raids, around the late 8th century, weren't planned spectacles. They were lightning strikes, hit fast, grab gold, burn what's left. But by the 9th century, as the Norse carved out trade routes and settlements from Dublin to Novgorod, raids became more than plunder. They were rituals, blending myth, power, and gore into a Viking trademark. The Norse believed death in battle sent warriors to Valhalla, Odin's hall, where they'd feast until Ragnarok. Captives, though, weren't so lucky. Their deaths were offerings, appeasing gods or sealing a chieftain's glory. Early raids, like the 793 Lindisfarne attack, saw monks slaughtered at altars, their blood smeared on crosses as a middle finger to Christian gods. But as Viking power grew, so did the theatrics. Villages weren't just burned, they were stages, with captives as unwilling actors in games of death. Picture a raided hamlet, 860 AD, somewhere in Northumbria. The longships beach at dawn, warriors spilling out like wolves. Houses blaze, screams pierce the fog, and survivors are herded to the village green. Here, the games begin. The most infamous was the Blood Eagle, a ritual execution reserved for high-value enemies. Snorri Sturluson, a 13th century Icelandic poet, describes it. The victim's back was sliced open, ribs hacked from the spine and spread like wings, lungs pulled out to flap in the wind. A chieftain's son, Ivar the Boneless, allegedly blood-eagled King Aelle of Northumbria in 867 to avenge his father. Whether myth or fact, archaeologists debate, citing no clear skeletal evidence. The tale terrified foes, its legend a psychological weapon. The crowd didn't just watch. They roared, their chants a hymn to Odin. These spectacles were propaganda. Defy the Vikings, and your death becomes their art. Jarls like Harald Hardrada used such displays to cow rivals, their sagas boasting of reddened fields. The logistics were brutal. Warriors trained to kill with precision, priests Gothi, reading omens in entrails, and thralls hauling captives across seas in open boats, half-starved to ensure compliance. Not every game was so elaborate. The wolf pit was simpler, but no less cruel. Captives were tossed into dugout pits with starved wolves, their screams drawing bets from warriors on who'd last longest. A 10th century account from Orkney describes a Frankish knight torn apart as Vikings laughed, passing mead horns. Wolves weren't random. They were sacred to Odin, their ferocity a divine mirror. Bones from such pits, found in Denmark, show teeth marks and shattered limbs, proof of the carnage. Women and children face their own horrors. In Ireland, 841, a raid on Armagh saw nuns forced into gladiatorial combats, armed with sticks against Viking axes. The crowd jeered as they fell, their deaths mocked as offerings of Freya, goddess of war and fertility. Children, seen as pure, were sometimes sacrificed to appease sea gods like Aegir before voyages. A mass grave in Norway, dated to 900 AD, holds juvenile skulls with cut marks, hinting at ritual killings. No one was spared, not out of savagery, but strategy. Every death reinforced Viking dominance. Theater was key. Captives were dressed as enemies. Saxons in mock armor, priests in stolen vestments, to reenact Viking victories. A 911 raid on Paris saw Frankish soldiers forced to fight each other, their deaths scripted to mimic Clovis's defeats. The imbalance was deliberate. Victims weakened by hunger, given dull blades or none, while Viking champions wielded rune-etched swords. The crowd loved the suspense. Would the captive dodge once before the inevitable? It was propaganda and blood, every slash shouting. The Norse rule all. Animals weren't just props. They were co-stars. Bears, chained and goaded, mauled prisoners in makeshift arenas. A 10th century saga tells of a chieftain in Sweden pitting a slave against a bear, the man armed only with a cloak. The crowd bet furs on how long he'd scream. Eagles, sacred to Odin, were loosed on bound victims, their beaks tearing flesh as priests chanted. Excavations in Uppsala reveal animal bones alongside human, some with deliberate starvation marks, rigged for maximum chaos. Logistics rivaled a modern film set. Longships carried portable cages for beasts, built by shipwrights who doubled as carpenters for scaffolds. Blacksmiths forged chains, skalds, poets composed verses to hype the crowd. Raids were planned around lunar cycles, omens read in raven flights or blood patterns. A single raid could net hundreds of captives, march for days to central sites like Ribe or Hedeby, where thousands gathered. The Viking economy thrived on it. Slaves, loot, and fear-fueled trade networks stretching to Baghdad. Kings and jarls were the directors. Ragnar Lothbrok, possibly legendary, reportedly staged mass executions to cement his name, drowning prisoners in fjords as offerings to Ran, the sea goddess. His sons, like Bjorn Ironside, upped the ante, turning raids into festivals. In 845, Bjorn's fleet sacked Paris, parading captives through burning streets. Some burned alive in fire games to honor Thor. The crowd's cheers weren't just joy. Silence risked suspicion of disloyalty. By midday, as smoke thickened and the sun climbed, raids shifted to mythic reenactments. Captives played roles from Norse tales. Loki, bound and tortured, Balder, slain by mistletoe. A 9th century account from York describes a monk forced to play Fenrir, the wolf god, chained and speared as Vikings howled. The uncertainty, would he beg or fight, kept crowds glued. These weren't stories. They were flesh and blood tragedies. The ground their stage. Fire was a favorite prop. Victims, coated in pitch, were set ablaze as human torches, mimicking myths of Surt, the fire giant. A 10th century Irish chronicle records 20 captives burned during a Dublin raid, their screams pleasing Thor. Water played its part too. In drowning games, prisoners were tied in shallows, left to struggle as tides rose. A 912 saga from Iceland tells of a traitor submerged. His last bubbles bet on like dice. The cruelty wasn't random. It was scripted, each death a lesson in Viking might. Scale could stagger. The Great Heathen Army's 865 invasion of England saw hundreds executed over months, their bodies displayed on stakes along roads. Archaeologists find mass graves, some with 200 skeletons, showing axe wounds and missing limbs. The message: Vikings didn't just conquer, they owned death itself. Devices added flair. The Iron Claw, a spiked gauntlet, tore flesh in mock duels. Helmets, heavy and vision-blocking, forced captives to stumble, amusing the crowd. Armor, rags, or stolen gear, useless against Viking steel. The line between ritual and madness blurred. Chieftain Olaf Tryggvason in the 990s burned Christian converts to test their faith, his ego fed by cheers. Harald Bluetooth, unifying Denmark, used raids to crush rebels, their death stage as warnings. But excess bread cracks. By the 11th century, Christianized Vikings like Nut the Great scaled back blood games, fearing divine judgment. Even pagans whisper dissent. Sagas hint at Skull's mocking bloodlust kings. Philosophers like Alcuin of York, a 9th century scholar, decried the raid's cruelty, writing, "The heathens spill blood for sport, hardening their souls." Christian converts among the Norse faced torture themselves, their deaths in pits or pyres twisted into spectacle. Economically, raids drained resources, ships, men, and beasts cost fortunes. Culturally, the thirst for blood dulled Viking resilience, their sagas turning inward as conquest slowed. By the 12th century, as Christianity spread, the games faded. Longships rotted, arenas grew silent. Excavations in Burka reveal mass graves, bones etched with blade and claw, whispering of a brutal past. Today, rune stones stand weathered, their carvings faded but heavy with memory. Axes clashing, wolves howling, crowds roaring. Walk those shores and you might hear the echoes, chains rattling, fires crackling, a saga of cruelty normalized. Viking raids weren't just war. They were theater, shaping fear, faith, and obedience. Every pit, every eagle, every myth reborn in blood served one end, to make Viking power eternal. But history warns, glory built on slaughter sinks beneath its own weight. Which ritual shocks you most? The blood eagle's wings, the wolf pit's jaws, or the fire's roar? Drop your thoughts below. If this saga gripped you, hit subscribe for more dives into history's darkest tides. Until next time, remember, the fjords are quiet now, but their blood still whispers.